So continuation of the diabetes overview. In this class, we'll see about what are the complications of diabetes. So if they ask about what are the complications of diabetes, we can broadly classify into acute and chronic. So if comes under acute, we have two important things, that is hypoglycemia, another one is hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia further can classify into diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. So under chronic we have again into two category, microvascular and macrovascular. Under microvascular we have three pathies, that is retinopathy, nephropathy and neuropathy. Coming to macrovascular complication, we have CNS manifestation, means stroke, MI and arterial occlusion. This slide is very important. So because these are questions commonly asked in the either also in Viva and also in the theory. So in this slide we can see the national history of type 2 diabetes. So this is very important compared to type 1 diabetes. If you diagnose the type 2 diabetes, you can see in this slide the macrovascular complications has already been manifested. So when you diagnose a patient with type 2, if you are labeling them as type 2 diabetes, so they must be already have complications like what you have seen, the macrovascular complications and microvascular complications. So if you see there's an impaired glucose tolerance, because of, you can see that insulin, endogenous insulin is going down and down and down, and also insulin resistance and hepatic glucose production is going up and up and up. So there is postprandial blood glucose level will be high and fasting glucose also is climbing up. So you remember, if you remember this slide, you can very well write about they ask you about the type 2 diabetes. So based on this slide, you can write any essay or short notes. Okay. So coming to the introduction, see diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state. This hyperosmolar state otherwise called non-keto hyperglycemia. Two important acute complications. Okay, the decay is characterized associated with type 1 and also occurs in type 2 diabetes under conditions of extreme stress such as serious infection, trauma, cardiovascular or other emergencies. A presenting manifestation of type 2 diabetes also called ketosis prone diabetes mellitus. So coming to epidemiology, diabetic ketoacidosis incidence is 4.6 to 8 per 1000 person years among patient diabetes, more common in young, that is less than 65 years. Coming to hyperosmolar state is less than, so it is very, compared to decay is very less. So 1 per 1000 person years, most commonly seen is more than 65 years with type 2 diabetes. But if you see, the mortality is higher in hyperosmolar state than decay because of ranging from 5 to 20% because of underlying illness or other comorbidity. As we all know, the pathogenesis, both in whether it is diabetic ketoacidosis or hyperosmolar state, as we all very well know, it is a metabolic abnormality, that is absolute or related to insulin deficiency and increased amount of counter-regulatory hormones like glucagon. So in this slide, if you see, decreased insulin action, maybe it's relative or it could be absolute. Okay, if it is relative, what happens in peripheral tissue, there is more amount of amino acids like leucine, isoleucine will be released, which is taken up by the liver and it will be utilized for glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. So there will be more glucose production, which leads to high level of glucose in the blood. What you call is the hyperglycemia, osmotic diuresis. So osmotic diuresis, as you all very know, it can cause dehydration. So that is more common presentation you can see in the hyperosmolar state. If comes to this side, that absolute deficiency, it's more action on the adipose tissue. So what happens here? more free fatty acids will be released. So what will happen? The liver will take up more free fatty acids and produce more ketone body production, that is beta hydroxybutyric acid, acetoacetic acid. So what happens here? There is a hyperketonemia is more. So it's decreased alkaline buffer. So what happens here? Acidosis. So if you remember this slide, you can very well write about what is the main pathophysiology in the diabetic ketosis and what is the main problem or main pathophysiology in the hyperosmolar state. So predisposing or precipitating factors for diabetic ketoacidosis, as you very well know, is inadequate insulin treatment or non-compliance, new onset diabetes mellitus, acute illness like CVA, MI or acute pancreatitis, and drugs like cocaine and lithium. So coming to hyperosmolar state, see there is inadequate insulin treatment or non-compliance, acute illness like pneumonia, UTI and sepsis, CVA, myocardial infarction, acute pancreatitis, acute pulmonary embolus, intestinal obstruction. So continuation, endocrine, like acromegaly, thyrotoxicosis, Cushing syndromes can lead to hyperosmolar state. Drug therapy like beta adrenergic blockers, calcium channel blockers, chlorpromazine is a very rare causes for hyperosmolar state. The combination of elevated, so hyperglycemia have the combination of elevated hepatic glucose production and decreased peripheral glucose utilization. So what will happen? Hyperglycemia will lead to, as you all very well know, glycosuria, osmotic diuresis and dehydration. And in hyperosmolar state, there is a decreased kidney perfusion as well because of dehydration. So what happens is the result in decreased glucose clearance by kidney and thus further exacerbation of hyperglycemia. So in this slide, if you see the pathogenesis, so what happens when there is an insulin deficiency and the counter-regulate hormone glucagon in excess. So under insulin deficiency, you have enhanced lipolysis, so more free fatty acid delivered to the liver. So the increase in fatty acid CoA entry, so which can lead to increase in acetone. So ketonemia. Because of glucagon excess, there is altered hepatic metabolism. There is increased, that is activity of the carnitine palmitoyl transferase. So free fatty acid conversion to keto acids like acetoacetic acid and beta hydroxybutyric acid. So acetone is due to mainly acyl CoA, whereas acetoacetic acid and beta hydroxybutyric acid is more due to because of the increased activity of carnitine palmitoyl transferase. So coming to acidosis, what is the mechanism for acidosis in DKA? As you all very well know, it is due to increased or overproduction of beta hydroxybutyric acid and acetoacetic acid. What happens at physiological pH? You can see these two keto acids dissociate completely. So the excess will be, as you know, acid will be bound by the base, that is hydrogen ions. So hydrogen ions bind bicarbonate, resulting in, so excess acid will be bound by the base, that is bicarbonate, so resulting in decreased serum bicarbonate levels. So thus the ketone bodies circulate in the anionic form, which leads to, as you all very well know, diabetic ketosis is an anion gap acidosis, that is a characteristic part of the DKA. So these are the important things that you need to know. So in diabetic ketosis is a high anion gap acidosis. So what happens in metabolic acidosis? What happens in the body? What it will do? It will induce hyperventilation through stimulation of the peripheral chemoreceptors and respiratory center in the brainstem. So which will elicit a decrease in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So this hyperventilation. So when you see any patients coming to the casualty, they are hyperventilating. Okay, if you is engaged, we can just think there may be hyperventilation syndrome, but still we have to do the sugar to find out it is really due to this anxiety, hyperventilating because of anxiety, or it is due to really acidosis because of acidosis, metabolic acidosis, they will be hyperventilating. So this important thing we have to assess the casualty, because we should not leave just like that, because In type 1 diabetes, their presentation is mainly as a diabetic ketoacidosis, may be the first presentation. So this will partially compensate for this hyperventilation will partially compensate for the metabolic acidosis by washing out the carbon dioxide. So if you see this slide, actually, as you all know, insulin is an anabolic hormone. So what happens here? If there is insulin deficiency, so what happens generally in our body? So there is increased catabolism. So what happens? There is increased glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, and lipolysis. Two lysis happening, lipolysis and glycogenolysis, and one genesis, that is gluconeogenesis. So the production of glucose. So overproduction. So there is more glucose. They can cause wasting and weight loss. Lead to hyperketonemia. So there is a ketonuria, vomiting, and ketotic breath. Acetone in the breath. So what happens? Hyperketonemia can cause acidosis. Then the presentation will be diabetic ketoacidosis. If you don't treat properly, don't think diabetic ketoacidosis can cause death if you don't treat properly. But as a patient, if you treat properly, they are salvageable patients. And one more thing, the acidosis you have to keep in mind, it can cause hypotension. So you may not have other reasons. So if you rule out other reasons, there is no cardiac problem, there is no problem with the hydration, okay, but still patient is having hypotension, then definitely you have to look for ABG, to look for any acidosis, because we have come across this kind of presentation. Coming to here, decreased catabolism. What happens? Decreased anabolism. So what happens? There's a hyperglycemia which can cause fatigue, glycosuria, so osmotic diuresis, salt and water depletion which can cause hypotension and tachycardia. But ultimately, if you don't intervene, can cause death. So coming to evaluation of the patient, laboratory findings or laboratory investigations. You have to assess the vital signs, as you all very well know that you have to look for blood pressure, respiratory rate, pulse rate, temperature, cardiorespiratory status by means of doing clinical examination as well as doing ECG. Respiratory status you can do clinically by inspection, palpation, percussion and auscultation, and if needed you can order for the X-ray or CT, and assess the mental status, because of severe dehydration they may be drowsy, because of acidosis or they may be drowsy. Okay, the mental status is very important. Or precipitating features or factors like they have stroke, along with that they can have diabetic ketoacidosis. With the stroke they can have hyperosmolar state coma. So complete history, clinical examination and vital signs is very important. And assess the volume status by doing skin turgor, look for mucosa and ask for the urine output, or otherwise you can catheterize. The patient assess the urine output. Anyway, you'll be doing immediately GMR and you'll be ordering for electrolytes, urea and nitrogen creatinine, urine analysis, and immediately bedside urine ketones. You have a strips also is there, dipstick, and plasma osmolality and mixed ABG. ABG you can go for arterial or you can go for VBG. ECG, serum level, if you see glucose is more than 250, and you can appropriately order for the blood or urine cultures and lipase and chest. So in this slide you can see the causes for hyperglycemic state. One is diabetes, other thing is non-ketotic hyperosmolar coma, impaired glucose tolerance, and stress hyperglycemia. If you take only the ketosis, you can have ketotic hypoglycemia, alcoholic ketosis, and starvation ketosis. If you take only acidosis, you have other metabolic like lactic acidosis, hyperchloremic acidosis because of salicylism, uremic acidosis because of kidney failure, and drug-induced acidosis. So, but if you all the three things on patient, that hyperglycemia, acidosis, and ketosis, then definitely the diagnosis will be diabetic ketoacidosis. So, if you see the complications of diabetes, the most complications may be related to the treatment. So, you have to be very carefully how to treat the patient. You are not supposed to decrease the blood sugar, like if it is in 500, Within 1 hour, you are not supposed to decrease it to 100 or 200. All the things has to be gradual. The most common complication, because they can go for hypoglycemia, they can go for hypokalemia and hyperchloremia. Less common complication is cerebral edema. So it's more common in pediatric age group than fluid overload. If you give more fluid rather than giving it in order in a stepwise fashion, and acute ARDS because of more fluid, sometimes you can go for non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema also, then acute gastric dilatation. So coming to treatment, so what should be the goal in treating diabetic ketoacidosis? To improve the circulatory volume and tissue perfusion, to decrease the serum glucose in an orderly manner, to correct the acidosis and electrolyte imbalances. These objectives are usually accomplished through the administration of insulin, IV fluid and electrolyte replacement solutions. And also, not the least but important one is the identification and treatment of the underlying cause. So if you see in this slide, you concentrate on the some water and the sodium and potassium mainly. So if you see, there's 7 liters, but here hyperosmolar there is 10.5 to 11 liters of fluid. And if you see the sodium level, here it will be 4, deficit will be less, but here the deficit, see here if you see the sodium level also will be more because of the dehydration. If you do the sodium level, it will be more, whereas in DKA it will be less. You have what you call the corrected sodium level. Here the potassium also 3 to 5, but here it is 5 to 15 millimoles per kg. Here chloride is 3 to 5, here 3 to 7. Phosphate is 1 to 1.5, here is 2. But if you concentrate more on this water and sodium, what happens in decay, and also potassium level, what happens in decay, the potassium and the levels in both the decay and hyperosmolar state coma. So what is the management? Always you should look for ABC, airway, breathing and circulation. Monitor using cardiac monitor, capnography and pulse oximeter. Monitor serum glucose hourly and basic electrolytes, plasma osmolality and venous pH every 2 to 4 hours until the patient is stable. So coming to IV fluids, you have to give liters of isotonic saline as rapidly as possible to patient with signs of shock, but not giving in more than what the patient requires. So you have to give isotonic saline at 15-20 ml kg per hour in the absence of cardiac compromise for the first few hours to hypolimic patients without shock. After intravascular volume is restored, give 1/2 of the, that is 0.45% saline at 4 to 14 ml kg per hour if the corrected sodium is normal or elevated. Isotonic saline is continued if the corrected serum sodium is reduced. Add dextrose to the saline solution when the serum glucose reaches 200 mg per deciliter. So regarding the potassium, you have to replete the potassium deficit. Is very, very important. That is more important than giving the insulin. Regardless of the initial measured serum potassium, patients with decay have a large total body potassium deficit. So if initial serum is below 3.3 milliequivalents per liter, hold insulin and give potassium 20 to 30 milliequivalents per hour IV until potassium concentration is above 3.3 milliequivalents per liter. If initial potassium is 3.3 to 5.3, give 20 to 30 per liter IV fluid. Maintain the potassium between 4 to 5 milliequivalents per liter. If initial serum potassium is more than 5.3, do not give potassium, but check every 2 hours. So if it's below 3.3, between 3.3 5.3, above 5.3, these are the potassium replacement you are supposed to give. So coming to insulin treatment, do not give insulin if initial serum potassium is below 3.3. You replete the potassium first. Either of the two regimens can be used. One is 0.1 units per kg IV bolus, then you have to go for continuous IV infusion. or do not give bolus and start continuous IV infusion rate of 0.14 units per kg per hour. Continue insulin infusion until ketoacidosis is resolved and serum glucose is below 200 mg per deciliter and subcutaneous insulin is begun. So coming to complications of chronic hyperglycemia. So we have retinopathy, nephropathy and peripheral neuropathy. So retinopathy, under retinopathy we have macular edema, capillary non-perfusion, angiogenesis, hemorrhage, glaucoma. Nephropathy, because of damaged glomeruli, there will be glomerular hyperfiltration. It is due to renal damage. Peripheral neuropathy, so mainly nerve damage. Because of that, they can have ulceration and necrosis. Here you have macrovascular stroke, heart disease, you have endothelial dysfunction, atherosclerosis, hypertension, dyslipidemia, prokaryotic state, antifibrinolytic state, and vascular inflammation. Coming to autonomic neuropathy, they may cause nerve damage, GI dysfunction, and genitourinary dysfunction. So reducing the risk of diabetic complications is essential because if you see in this slide, the leading cause of blindness in working age adults is diabetic retinopathy. And there is also 2 to 4-fold increase in cardiovascular mortality and stroke. If you see a diabetic neuropathy, leading cause of non-traumatic lower extremity amputations. And in diabetic nephropathy, where it's a leading cause of end-stage renal disease. So these things will tell the reiterator that you have to control the blood sugar, thereby controlling the complications. So for all these things, patient education or patient educating about the diabetes and his blood sugar control is very, very important. Coming to mechanisms of complications, advanced glycosylation end products, AGE, okay, is important one, have been shown to cross-link proteins, that is collagen, extracellular matrix proteins. It will accelerate the atherosclerosis, promote glomerular dysfunction, and also reduce the nitric oxide synthesis and induce endothelial dysfunction and alter the extracellular matrix composition and structure. And the serum level very well correlates with the level of glycemia, and these products accumulate as glomerular filtration rate declines. So if you see in this slide, if you see what happens, okay, what happens with persistently elevated glucose, that glycation of proteins, okay. So what is the effect on the fibrinogen? It causes impaired fibrinolysis, formation of less thrombogenic fibrin network, vascular dysfunction. If you see on the other hand, albumin, it decrease, and also there's a decreased delivery of long chain fatty acid, platelet activation and aggregation, generation of free radicals, and decrease intracellular glucose uptake. On collagen, okay, then development of fibrosis in diabetes, atherosclerotic development and skin aging. Immunoglobulin, it has effect, it can cause autoimmune disease, inflammation and immunosuppression. So there is more glucose and combines with protein, causes it cause shift bases, formation of shift bases, okay, along with reactive intermediates can cause advanced glycation products. And there is also one more terminology called Amadori products is also lead to advanced glycation end products. So in this slide, if you see the advanced glycation end products along with is receptor, that is a RAGE. It can lead to reduction of nitric oxide synthase, oxidative stress is increased, and chemokine cytokines release takes place. There is also cross-linking of collagen and binding of lipoproteins. So these are the important things that AG is advanced glycation end product is the important one, which causes the chronic complications, thereby altering the functions of the cells. So if you see in this slide, what happens along with AG receptor binding, there is a cellular activation, which have an effect on the cardiovascular, diabetic neuropathy, diabetic nephropathy, diabetic retinopathy, and CNS disorder, which have effect on the endothelial cells, macrophages, and smooth muscle cells. Whereas AG cross-linking to proteins cause other malfunction or other disorders. So this is some of the fundus picture. You can see there is a cotton wool spots And also there is you can see there is also angiogenesis, new vessel formation, and multiple hemorrhage. So in this picture you can see what you call as a trophic ulcer because of decreased sensation, or also there is also gangrene because of ischemia. So coming to peripheral nervous system, actually here it comprises of motor, sensory, and autonomic. So under motor here it could be myelinated, sensory it could be myelinated, unmyelinated, or thinly myelinated. Autonomic differential thinly myelinated and unmyelinated. And you have different types of fibers, alpha, beta, okay, delta, all the receptors. So you can see there's a motor is for mainly muscle control. Sensory we can for touch, vibration, position perception, cold perception, pain, and warm and pain. And here autonomic is mainly you can know that is for heart rate, BP, sweating, GAT, and genitourinary function. You can have this fibers, this nerve fibers can be either large fiber or is a small fiber neuropathy. So it's a small fiber neuropathy, predominantly is the sensory will be get affected. So coming to peripheral neuropathies, there are two types of pathological changes. One is there's a thickening of the walls of the nutrient vessels that supply the nerve, leading to vessel ischemia. Second is there's a segmental demyelination process that affects the Schwann cells. This demyelination process accompanied by a slowing of nerve conduction. And clinical manifestations for diabetic peripheral neuropathies vary with the location of the lesion. So if you see in this picture, you can see healthy nerves and the blood vessels on one hand. Another hand is damaged vessels. So here in this picture, you can see how the vasa nerva looks. And here, because of occluded, what happens? So occluded is a proper vessels, the blood supply will be there. So you can see how the minute nerve fibers looks. Here, because of occluded vasa nervorum, you can see that and how that there is a damage of the myelinated nerve fibers. And also here you can see unmyelinated nerve fiber. Here you can also see the damaged unmyelinated nerve fibers. So as the picture previously I showed, so you can classify as a somatic, that is polyneuropathy, bilateral sensory. So sensory means they can present with numbness and tingling, impaired pain and temperature, light touch, 2-point discrimination, vibratory sensation. So clinically you can look for the decreased ankle and knee jerk reflexes. Coming to mononeuropathies, there is the involvement of mixed nerve trunk that includes loss of sensation, pain, and motor weakness as well. Amyotrophy, what you call as amyotrophy, nothing but is associated with muscle weakness, wasting, and severe pain of the muscles in the pelvic girdle and thigh. Usually it will be asymmetric amyotrophy. So coming to autonomic, they have impaired vasomotor function that most commonly presents with partial hypotension. So in any diabetic patient, sitting and standing BP is very, very important. Second one is impaired GI function. So it can lead to gastric atony. So early satiety could be there. Diarrhea, often postprandial and nocturnal. Impaired genital function, which can lead to paralytic bladder, incomplete voiding, impotence, and retrograde ejaculation. So cranial nerve involvement, they can have extraocular nerve paralysis. Commonly, third nerve will be involved and impaired pupillary responses. So in this picture, what they have shown is the importance of the monofilament test. So it could detect the early onset of the peripheral neuropathy. So we can ask the patient to be very careful and very careful regarding this. If they have defect in this test, they are not able to identify the sensation, then they are very careful about the foot. So to prevent ulcer formation. Coming to very important diabetic nephropathy, it is one of the leading cause of end-stage renal disease. The most common lesion you see in people with diabetes are those affect the glomeruli. Various glomerular changes, that is capillary basement membrane thickening, diffuse glomerular sclerosis, and nodular glomerular sclerosis. There is one name is given for this nodular glomerular sclerosis, that is Kimmelstein-Wilson. Risk factors for diabetic nephropathy are genetic and familial predisposition, elevated blood pressure, poor glycemic control, smoking, hyperlipidemia, and microalbuminuria. So coming to pathogenesis, we have two important things. One is metabolic, another one is hemodynamics. Under metabolic, if you see the glucose, as previously I told you about the advanced glycation end products along with the proteins, They can cause extracellular matrix cross-linking. It's increased extracellular matrix. And here, because of flow and pressures, there is increased vascular permeability because of this vascular endothelial growth factor. All will lead to extracellular matrix accumulation and which can lead to proteinuria. See, as I initially started the first slide with acute and chronic complications, to just reiterate that point. Okay, if you see in this slide, there is a hyperglycemia. So what happens if there is a spike? Okay, they can go for acute toxicity. If it is sustained hyperglycemia, they can go for chronic toxicity and diabetic complications. See, in this slide, you see it as a continuing the journey with the diabetes. So any patients they have found to have diagnosed with diabetes, okay, it is a journey. They have to live with the diabetes, but with a control, like taking the oral medicines or other diabetic medicines, okay, or insulin, and they have to go for their goal along with healthy eating and keeping active and always checking for problems. So coming to an important case scenario, say a 50-year-old male brought to casualty by his wife and altered sensorium is a known diabetic on OHA and also a chronic alcoholic. Our admission is GMR was 11 mg per deciliter. What is the diagnosis? How would you manage this patient? Very well, you know the diagnosis is hypoglycemia. So if in a few slides, you can see how to manage this patient and hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is nothing occurs from a relative excess of insulin in the blood and is characterized by below normal blood glucose levels. It occurs most commonly in people treated with insulin injections, but prolonged hypoglycemia also can result from some oral hypoglycemic agents. There may be error in insulin dose, failure to eat, increased exercise, decreased insulin need after removal of stress situation, medication changes and change in insulin sites. This alcohol decreases the liver gluconeogenesis, and people with diabetes need to be cautioned about its potential for causing hypoglycemia. Actually, I would like to share, because when I was doing duty in a casualty some 3 or 4 years ago, one patient was brought in the trolley, one elderly male. Okay, was brought to casualty in unconscious state. So GMR, that time immediately any unconscious patient comes, immediately we look for GMR. So when we took that GMR, actually it was the GMR was less than 30, and so actually my JR, by seeing the patient, told he may not be. I told him, you just ask the history whether he is alcoholic or not. But my JR, he told, by seeing the patient, okay, he told he may not be alcoholic because of some external things he was wearing. Based on that, he told he may not be alcoholic. Then I told, no, don't decide anything by yourself. You just ask the patient or patient even unconscious, patient relative. Okay, so wife was accompanying this patient. So I asked her, does he have any bad habits like alcohol? She told his main food is alcohol. He will take only alcohol, he will not take any food at all. So that is the reason for this condition, she told. So one thing what I understood is, don't think or don't assume anything by yourself. Okay, if you have any doubt, you have to clarify the doubt. You have to ask the patient or patient attender, and you have to clarify the doubt regarding. So you can in this case, very well, I know the patient, because of alcohol is the reason. So he has not taken along with the diabetes, he has not taken the food. So hypoglycemia, why it is important? Because the brain relies on blood glucose as its main energy source. Hypoglycemia produces behaviors related to altered cerebral function like headache, difficulty in problem solving, disturbed or altered behavior, coma and seizures. At the onset of hypoglycemic episode, activation of parasympathetic nervous system often causes hunger. The initial parasympathetic response is followed by activation of sympathetic nervous system. This causes anxiety, tachycardia, sweating and constriction of the skin muscle. That is, skin is cool and clammy. So the two ways of treating hypoglycemia. One is if patient is conscious enough, then you can ask them to take a sugar, honey, candy or orange juice. If unconscious and unable to swallow, you have to give glucagon. So glucagon is the important drug which can be either given intramuscularly or subcutaneously. It is so if anybody asks you, patient is unconscious, what is the drug of choice? It is a glucagon, not the glucose. In situations of severe or life-threatening hypoglycemia, it may be necessary to administer glucose intravenously. So to conclude about this topic of complications, so you have to screening of eye, legs, and skin. All those things is very very important to prevent the complications. And also one more thing, don't think people with diabetes will die early, but people with diabetes living longer if they follow the proper treatment and compliance and diet.